Lesson 35, 7.3, trinomial factoring when a equals 1. We're dealing with quadratic equations here, so we have x squared plus bx plus c equals 0. Notice that this equation here is in standard form. Out in front of your x squared is actually your a value, so a is 1. This little step right here in words basically is going to describe trinomial factoring. To factor trinomials in the form x squared plus bx plus c, you need to find two integers for m and p with a sum of b. So it has to have a sum of b. Here is b. We have to have a sum of b, and it has to have a product of c. What you're going to do is basically you're going to take your trinomial here, x squared plus bx plus c, and write it as two binomials. We've factored by grouping, we've factored out greatest common factors out of various polynomials. When you look at these trinomials here that were given for the quadratics, if you look at example A, for instance, it says x squared plus 9x plus 20. You're not able to factor out an x out of every term. You're not able to factor out a coefficient out of either of the terms or a constant out of the terms. So what we need to do is we need to factor by basically converting this down into two binomials. So in example 1, we have b and c are positive. If you look at b and c, well, here's my b value, here's my c value. What we need to do is we need to figure out a product of c. So here's your product of c. Well, the only way you're going to get c, and this is a positive 20, is you can take 1 times 20, you can take 2 times 10, and you can have 4 times 5. All of these would give me a product of c. Now, it has to have a sum of b. Now, what we are doing, as mentioned above here, are two binomials. X and x go here, because when you FOIL that, your x times your x would give you your x squared. Now, this is the next biggest step here. You have a positive and a positive, plus plus. We need to get to 9. In order to get to 9, we'd have to use a 4 and a 5. Okay? Out of these c values, 1 and 21 wouldn't get us 9, that would give us 21. 2 and 10 when added together, that's going to give us 12. This is the only spot that's going to give us 9. So when you actually FOIL this, you'd have x times x, x squared. X times 5x, giving us 5x. 4 times x is a positive 4x, so that 4x plus the 5x would give us that 9x value. And then if you multiplied your positive 4 times your positive 5, that would give us 20. So that's kind of the description there. I'm going to give you a little cheat sheet here. If your trinomial up on top here is in standard form, so once you have it in standard form, if the trinomial is plus plus, the binomials will be plus plus. So if you look at that first example, we have plus plus, and binomial is plus plus. If the trinomial is plus minus, your binomial is going to be plus minus. If your trinomial is minus plus, your binomial will be minus minus. And if you have minus minus as a trinomial, you will get plus minus. Now, those binomials, all these signs, you don't have to write them in this order. You don't have to say that the first binomial is positive and then the second binomial is positive. Or if you look at this one, I don't have to say the first one is positive and the second one's negative. It's just that one of your binomials has to be positive and one of your binomials has to be negative. That's basically what it's stating. So if we look at the next example here, we notice that the trinomial, it is in standard form. And in that standard form, it is plus plus. So plus plus for the trinomial, so our binomial would be plus plus. We're going to have our c's out front here. So when we multiply those or FOIL them, we're going to get c squared. So the next thing I want to do is take down and break down some products of c. The products of c, I would say, well, it's 1 and 24, 2 and 12, 3 and 8, 4 and 6. Now remember, they have to have a sum of b. b is 11. So if I look at this and both these terms in my binomial are plus, basically they're going to be added together. Those two terms are going to be positive. So I look at my product of C, and which out of that group could give me, when added together, give me that 11? Well, there's only one term here, and that would be this group right here, 3 plus 8. 3 plus 8. Can be interchangeable. Another way we can write this is C plus 8 and C plus 3. The reason why it doesn't matter order is because in your binomial your signs are still both plus. So this would be our answer here in B, either one, and our answer obviously here over there for A. Next group, determine, is it in standard form? Yes, example A is in standard form. So it's in standard form. We have minus plus. Well, if we jump back to the previous, the minus plus in the trinomial here would give us a minus minus for the binomial. So we would have our two binomials here. We'd have x, x. We'd have minus, minus. Again, here's the product of 12. So, or product of C, I should say. So we'd have 1 and 12, we'd have 2 and 6, we'd have 3 and 4. Remember, it has to have the sum of b. b is negative 8. So how are we going to get to negative 8? Well, if you look at it, this is negative, so it really doesn't matter what comes first, but 2 and 6 are going to get us, when we add that together, the negative 2 and negative 6 is going to give us that negative 8. So there would be our answer for A. B, same thing. We have minus plus. So in our nomial here, we're going to, our binomials will have minus minus. And our values here would be A and A. So 28 is it. We're basically what has the product of C that when added together is going to give us that negative 11. The only thing that would come up there would be 4 and 7. When you multiplied 4, negative 4 times that negative 7, you're going to get the positive 28. And when you add them together, they will give us the negative 11. Example 3a, well, we have plus a negative. Now plus a negative basically will be plus a negative in our binomial here. We'll throw x out front, x out here. In the previous 4 examples, order did not matter. The reason why, the first 2 examples, if you check them out on your paper there, the first 2 examples, everything in our binomials here that we had, they were both a plus and a plus, so the order didn't matter. Plus, plus. The second example, they were both minus, minus, so things can be switched around. You could have actually, in this example, we could have put a 6 here, and we could have put the 2 there, because they're still both minus, minus. This is the critical step. Notice in these binomials, it's not the same sign, so this is the critical piece here, that make sure that we put thing that needs to be, whatever needs to be positive in this slot, and whatever needs to be negative, put in this slot. So if we look up here, again, product of C, so we're going to get that negative 15. Well, I'm just going to go ahead and list off a couple products of C. Well, we have 1 and 15, and we'd have 3 and 5 would be the products of C. Now we need to determine what's going to get us the sum of B. B is a positive 2, which tells me I need to use this group, 3 and 5. Well, how would I use 3 and 5 that when added together I will get that sum of B? B is a positive 2, so 5 has to go in the sign that has a plus sign, and 3 has to go here. So when you add that together, positive 5 and minus 3 is going to give us that negative 2. So that has to go that way. You could rewrite this. The only way that you would rewrite this, though, would be this way. X minus 3 could go first, and then you would have x plus 5 second. But it's still, when added together, I'd still get that positive 2. Looking at our next example here, we have a minus minus for the trinomial, minus minus. So our binomials, we are going to have a positive and a negative. and we'd have x and x. Again, what has the product of c? And we could list these out. We'd have 1 and 18, we'd have 2 and 9, and we could have 3 and 6. Now we need to determine which one's going to give us the sum of b. The sum of b is -7. So out of that group up here, what could I use to get -7? That would be 2 and 9. To get a -7, the 9 has to be negative and the 2 has to be positive. In these last 3 skills check, I just want you to go ahead and give these a shot. I'm going to actually start you off on the first one here. Looking at this, you're going to want to reorganize that because that's not in standard form. Sometimes when things aren't in standard form, you might have the wrong signs put in that binomial. So write things in standard form first and then carry on from there. So go ahead, pause the video, and work through each of these. Alright, now that we're back, we see plus in that trinomial there, so we'll have a plus in our 2 binomials, and we have z plus 9 and z plus 1. Next group, we go ahead and write this into standard form. We have minus plus, so we should have 2 minuses in our binomials, winding up with m minus 21 and m minus 1. The last one in group C, it is already in standard form, and we have a plus minus in the trinomial. So our 2 binomials, we should have a positive and a negative, and we wind up with y plus 16 and y minus 3. This concludes lesson 35, trinomial factoring when a equals 1.